best to stay within time limit. I'll cut out wherever I can with examples, and we can talk about that in the question answer session. I'd like to start with thank you very much for letting me present today. This topic is not related to India, but I'm very excited because it's related to my adopted country, I should say, United States in some respect, and also one of the most important topics in today's time with respect to international migration. So very quickly, this is the outline of my paper. These are the different sections that I have in my paper. With introduction, and I spent some time on the scope and scale of the refugee crisis and numerical figures to understand what's really happening there. I do have separate sections on the economic impact of this crisis on Europe and America, and somewhere in my research I found that economic impact was most in Europe and political impact was both Europe and America. So I do the political impact in both continents. I purposely left out Middle East in my discussion, not because it's not important, but because it was too big of a project to cover in 6,000 words, or I kind of,
10 minutes.
Yeah. So I kind of kept it, narrowed it down to 2 continents, and that was a challenge in itself. And some early conclusions with what I found. So I'm going to quickly start with introduction to the Syrian refugee crisis, which, as most of you know, began in 2011 with the civil war in Syria. But skipping straight to the refugee crisis since then, if you're looking at numbers, once again, the impact is immediate in Middle East, Europe, and North America, particularly United States. And we want to look at some numbers. So I provided a map just for you guys to get a good look at the region, so that you know where is Syria. It's right here, right here, Syria. And if you can see, it's in a location where people can travel easily to the neighboring countries. Alright, some of the concepts and theories relating to my discipline in international relations and political science. I'm not going to read out the definitions for you, but you can go back and look at these definitions yourselves. The only thing I want to say is that international migration does not hold a very important place in international relations discourse. It is dominated by conflict and cooperation and democracy and all kinds of things. But migration is not high on its agenda as an area of discussion, or it's not treated as one of the most important. So I think with this crisis coming in, international migration has somehow come to the top of discussion in most academic circles. Other concepts as R2P, right to protect. Again, I encourage you to look at the former High Commissioner for UNHCR, former High Commissioner Antonio Guterres, and he has made a really good case for responsibility to protect and why we should respond to this humanitarian crisis. Other theories coming into the paper relate to economic theories and immigration policies, and we will look at that shortly. Definitions of who is a refugee, who is an asylum seeker, and who is an internally displaced person. All these are picked from the UNHCR website, so these are very good definitions for you to look at. Actors in international relations. Clearly this is something that touches all aspects of what we look at as actors in international relations. We have several international organizations involved, several countries involved, several NGOs involved, and clearly individuals are huge in this discussion. So very quickly looking at the scope and scale, I think one of the big things to remember is that since the crisis began in 2011, you have about half of that entire population of Syria, about 11 million people that are currently displaced. And as far as UNHCR numbers, you're looking at about 4.3 million refugees from Syria. So that's a big number. And as far as where they're going, clearly the neighboring countries in Middle East are huge. But of course, Europe is a big one because they want to go and settle in Europe, and that's where the controversy begins for the most part. Here's where they are in Middle East countries. Here's some good, quick numbers. Every time I check, the numbers change because it's getting updated so rapidly. So bear in mind that these numbers may not These are the source was Al Jazeera, yeah, and this was also 2015. And so again, with every passing month, you're just getting more numbers. So these are some numbers to look at. But this is so the only place I refer to Middle East is here, just to look at some numbers. But the big one is where are they going? And of course, one of the big places is Europe, and that's just a quick number with where they are and how they're going. Now, impact on Europe is huge, not only because they come to European countries, but where is the impact the most? I found that the impact is most in not transition countries, but destination countries. And where are they heading to is actually mostly in countries like Germany and Sweden, which are immigrant friendly as compared to some of the other countries. Shenzhen area operation Sofia, these are just some of the policies that came out from European Commission on the ease with which travel can be done and so on. So if you have more questions, we can talk about that later. But I think this figure explains nicely how the flows are happening and from where they're coming. Clearly the Mediterranean, coming in boats is one of the most preferred ways. And these are the waves through which they are entering Europe. And where do they prefer to go? As I said, Germany is one of their top destinations, and you can clearly see where they want to go. And obviously there is the economic argument there in Germany's own history. Alright, so I'm going to move on to economic impact of the Syrian refugee crisis, and two impacts, positive, negative. Clearly those are the easiest ways to look at this. So what is the positive impact? Positive impact is with more people there is a higher level of spending, and a larger labor force is expected to contribute to the local economy. So those are the big ones. And also it varies by country. Once again, transition countries are not going to benefit as much as the destination countries. Especially if you look at long term, a lot of economists agree that it's neither significant gain or drain overall, and so these are some of the positive, and also the contribution of migrants to the labor force in the countries where they are. The big one is, of course, demographic impact. As you know, Europe has got a declining demographic rate with an aging population. And so this is seen as a way to improve the population trends in some of these countries. And I just want to mention that here, the one big figure is that if you look at demographic transition theory, you kind of need 2.1 is the replacement level, and Europe right now is at 1.55. So they clearly need younger people, they need people coming into the country to do jobs that the aging population cannot do. And here too you have, shouldn't touch it too much. Okay. Anyways, again, I was going to say that, the same theme is that you have destination countries over time is going to benefit more from this increased population in their countries as opposed to transition. The negative impact is same for any country, any place, any time. I think one of the big ones is how it would impact local people, and one of the big ones is that the local population might lose their jobs to these incoming migrants or refugees. That's one of the big ones. I think it's point 2 here. And then the first one is that initially, you have to spend to integrate this section into society. So that initial spending for housing, for food, for tents, and whatever is needed. So that's a drain on these economies. And only some will benefit overall. So I'm going to look at the political impact in Europe first, and I think there were two or three main things. There's a whole history of Europe that has migrated. Migration is really a big thing for Europe. They have all this travel, they have settled down in different parts of the world in the last 500 years. But in migration into Europe right now is something that Europeans do not like. And a lot of it has to do with the big elephant in the room. It's called Islamophobia. and there's whole cultural impact and so on and so forth. We can talk about it. So one big impact is a rise of far-right parties that can actually be seen, and I have lots of examples here, ranging from France, UK, Denmark, even places like really friendly. I mean, you have a rise of parties that are very conservative, and the one big example I'd like to give is Austria. Austria, when it turned conservative, gave rise to Adolf Hitler, and so you're looking at politics, right-wing politics that's emerging and sweeping Europe at this time, and so. That's a big one, I think, one big political impact. The second big one is security and crime and what's happening right now. Two big things here. One was the Paris attacks on November 15 that led to this renewed anti-refugee backlash. So this was mainly because one of the terrorists had slipped into France in the disguise of a Syrian refugee. So this is one, and then the crime related to immigration, gangs, and so on, different countries like Sweden, and it has a bad impact on the local security of the place. Germany, do you have 2 minutes?
3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, very quickly, I want to move on to United States because that was my big one. But okay, just the last word. Angela Merkel herself has come under huge attack by media from her opposition parties because she is very pro-immigrant. But then you have the sexual assault on German, I think Dresden, I forget the name of the city, but in several places, and so this was in Germany. You can see the figure says rape refugees, and so it was huge backlash in Germany as well. So we have to kind of follow that story a little bit. Something I found by the Pew Center, that you do have many in European Union. You look at attitudes of the people towards immigration. I think mostly they don't want them. I think you can see that overall in this figure. That's a crux of whatever we were talking about. So moving on to political impact of Syrian refugee crisis in the United States, and I hope you like my little political joke here with that figure. It's Pinkie Pie. I know that because I have a 6-year-old. And I think the analogy here is Troy, going back to the Troy with refugees probably hiding in there in the guys and so on and so forth, with President Obama opening the doors. And so obviously this was a joke with a true connotation. Now, I'm not going to go over the history of United States refugee policies and acts, but they have been fairly welcoming of, it has earned the name of melting pot of the world and so on, and it kind of does that. So with respect to Syrian refugees, what's happening in the United States? One of the big things that came out was after this picture made the news headlines. It's a picture of 3-year-old Alan Kurdi. This shocked the world, and this prompted the United States to make a political statement. What are they going to do about Syrian refugees? And one of the reasons why the United States is kind of silent on this topic is the figures speak for themselves. So if you compare how much Germany has taken in, or Syrian refugees in Egypt and other places, when you compare the numbers in the United States, in 2014 it's less than 800. And if you look at prior to that, you have 2-digit numbers. But is the United States anti-refugee? No. Here's what I compiled from Department of Homeland Security. If you look at the numbers, they are welcoming people from Bhutan, from Burma, from Iraq. The numbers are good from, I think it was Somalia. But Syria, even in the last 3 years, is not picking up. So just want to say last thing here, U.S. has announced that I would admit in 2016 10,000. So there's 2 reactions to this. Only 10,000. That's what Europeans say. But United States says, well, look, we jumped up from 1,500 to 10,000. That's a big number for us. United States is poised for another election year, and all of the Republican candidates, for the most part, are anti-immigrant in general. And here's some of the statements that they said. I don't want to go into each one personally, but a lot of them have outrightly stated if elected they would literally drive them out of the country, and not allow is one thing, but even drive the ones already there, they will let them out of the country. Trump particularly was very verbal about this, and even the US Congress, both Republicans and Democrats have. So I'll stop here because I think those were the main points I wanted to make, and my conclusion was some of the points summarize same thing that I have talked so far, that impacts were both positive, negative. Migration is again huge in international discourse and the impact on economy, but political debate is something that's going on right now, and that's why I have the term early conclusions, because we want to see through this election year and see what's really going to happen. It's a work in progress.
But thank you very much.
Thank you.